Good morning, I'm Brigid Burke, and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. Those of you who don't normally join me, this is my daily live stream where I talk about something connected to transition life coaching, which is my coaching practice, and of course the name of this channel, and where I also will do a daily reading. Good morning. So today I'm going to have I didn't have a real strongly defined topic when I woke up this morning, and good morning, Alex, Patrick, Alex, good morning. Say everybody's name when they come in. So today I wasn't quite sure exactly, what I was going to cover today. It's another hot, disgusting day here. It's gonna be for a while. I mean, it's summer, and as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of summer, but I had itching on the back of my leg, and I've discovered over the last couple days that, hey, that I actually have massive poison ivy on the back of my leg. So I was like, oh, good. Fantastic. So anyway, that was not a fun thing. Well, I mean, I don't know. I suppose it could be a lot worse than what it is. And it could be, like, a couple months ago, I actually had it all over my hands. And that's even worse because I'm trying to do stuff with this at least. But the thing is, it's just hard to wear, like, socks and shoes when you have that. So maybe it's a good thing it's hot out, because then I can just walk around in sandals that have an open back and try to do that. So, but yeah, that's kind of what it is. So today, the thing I was actually gonna talk about today, and I do have a couple of decks. Obviously, I have the Osho Zen Tarot, and I also brought down the Moonology deck as well. I don't know, those were the two that kind of called out to me this morning. But again, another kind of strange dream night. And again, it's not so much that I would want to get heavily into the dream itself. And this is something that's just been going on. I mean, I guess I've always been somebody who's had blocks of like dreams and a lot of dreams, but particularly since I've been doing the Rahani and the Rahani cleanse, because once you actually are attuned to Rahani, Reiki is the same thing. You got to do this 3-week period of time. Good morning, Sam. This 3-week period of time where where you have to, where they want you to do the actual practice on yourself every single day to kind of detoxify, really, I guess is the word, because you're kind of getting stuff out of your system, getting blocks out of your own system. And like I said, it's just, I've done Reiki cleanses and stuff before, but this is just really tremendous. And last night's dream was really interesting because a lot of these dreams, when I sit down and analyze them, I'm like, oh, this has a lot to do with what's been blocked lately. So I might have mentioned, I don't know what live streams you've seen or what you've caught up on. I know some of you are on pretty much every day. But there was one dream that I had. Well, I talked about the fact that I was going to try to get my Slovakian passport because I am, my great-grandparents, both of them are most definitely from Slovakia, and we have documentation showing they are from Slovakia. And the law changed in 2022. And now it's basically, they've said that if you have a parent, it's like a lot of places now with ancestry passports. It's if you have a parent, grandparent, or great-grandparent from that area, then you can get a passport for that country. I mean, there's some documentation. It takes some time. You got to work through some things, but you can get that. A lot of people are doing it here in the U.S. They're getting passports by descent, ancestry by descent. Now, of course, people might say to me, well, with a name like Brigid Burke, why do you not have like an Irish passport, right? And my father's family is all Irish, English, apparently Scottish, Welsh, maybe a little bit of German there too. That's all, my father's family is all from that side. But they were fairly well established in America by the time that this kind of went down. So like my mother is definitely, I guess you would call her, I don't remember, I'm not quite sure how the generational terms go. Her father was born in this country, okay? And then she, so she's kind of second generation or maybe the first generation fully in this country. Her father's parents were not born in this country. On my father's side, his parents and grandparents were born in the USA. It was his great-grandparents that were born in Ireland, okay? Ireland and England, actually. And so that doesn't fly. I mean, that's great-great-grandparents, right? So that doesn't fly for citizenship by descent. So I was like, okay, well, what are my other Euro passport options? Because as anybody, I guess anybody who's known me for a long time knows I've been wanting to get out of the USA, and it's not new. It's something. It's probably something I had an opportunity to do in the early '90s, but I chose to get married and stay here instead, which was, not the best decision, shall we say? And kind of wishing I had just stuck with my original plan, but we never quite know why we take the pathways that we take. And of course, this does speak to the point that even when we make things that maybe we look back on later and go, wow, that was a mistake, we can later on, sometimes those mistakes can teach us other things. So it's not necessarily, or maybe you'll encounter people you wouldn't have otherwise encountered, or learn things that you wouldn't have otherwise learned. So it's just, whatever adventure you choose, you learn something from it, whether ultimately it turns out to have been in the broad scheme of things, the right thing to do. I should add that, like I said, I've been very involved in spiritual work, and I've had interests in stuff like this since I was really young. Like, probably, oh gosh, I'm trying to, been there. Yeah, exactly. I think we all have something where we're like, if I just made this decision and not that one, I'd probably be in a happier place right now. But see, at the time, that wasn't the decision I wanted to make. I was like absolutely certain that was not the decision I wanted to make. So I might not have been emotionally ready for it either, So we all have things, and yeah, we look back on it and go, well, no, anyway, whatever. Pick your expletive. But it was, but in any case, you kind of come around, and eventually, if that's where you're meant to go, you kind of circle back to it. I think is what happens. So this idea of circling back, there's a lot that's come up recently around origins. And again, as I've mentioned, we talk a lot about non-causality, the fact that sometimes stuff just happens. It's not that, there's a specific reason for this. That said, oftentimes the reasons that we have for doing things, those are the things that we want to make more apparent. These are the things that, if we feel blocked with something, then the block may be it's generally coming from something that we're unconsciously doing, and it may be a response to either something that's happened to us. So for example, if you have a hard time with love relationships, like I'm always just using myself as an example, not to make this about me, but just because I don't want to talk about other people's situations. Nobody's given me permission to do that. So if I just take my own situation, like I said, I got married in 1994. I was divorced by 2000. Well, I was separated by 2001, divorced by 2003. And it was, it was just one of those things I kind of dove into because I felt like that was what I was supposed to do. Good morning, Molly. I thought it was one of those things that I was supposed to do. And I realized very quickly, and I did have spirit guides and stuff at the time. I think that was where I was going with this, that I've always had this kind of spiritual bent. And I even have my cartouche cards right now, they're downstairs. But they had, at that time, and they were literally I was getting the set, if you follow cartouche, it's the big red card. I was getting it as the outcome every single time. And it was like when I was talking about my marriage, you're like, nope, bad idea, don't do this. But I was absolutely, because I'm a Taurus, I'm incredibly stubborn. So I was like, no, this is the thing I have to do. And because he and I had been so much in love before that I couldn't imagine why this would be a mistake. And that's a problem that a lot of times people will have. Certain things will happen in people's life, or they'll see something that appears to be like a gift, like, oh my gosh, this thing just magically appeared at the right time. And then if it turns out not to be the right thing, we go, well, wait a minute, I was pretty certain that this was the right thing for me. But it's a little bit almost like, that actually reminds me of the haunted house thing. Where people are like, wow, look at this house is so cheap, it's a gift. And then they move in and it's possessed by demons or whatever, what happens with it. But it's almost that kind of a thing where, the thing that appears to be a gift, it's like, there's the expression, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. But at the same time, sometimes it's like, follow your instincts on what the gift is. If something doesn't seem right about it, maybe you want to say thanks, no thanks. But a lot of times we do feel something is right at that time, and we just go for it. So, and again, it's important to understand that even if we make a mistake, even if we make a decision that's not good, ultimately, we look back and go, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. So you made a mistake. life is not just a series of wins and successes. You know, we have times when we mess things up. If we take a test, we don't get 100 on every test that we do, right? You have to. There's going to be times when you mess something up, and or you forget something. You know, you're just we're not. Some things we learn faster than others. Okay, and so that's just the way it is, and that's the way you got to look at it. It's not a case of oh, you're a stupid person, or you're a bad person, or you're not any of those things. You're just somebody who is trying to figure things out, kind of in a you figure them out in your own space and in your own time, and timing is a thing that comes up a lot. We often tend to be very, very impatient about when, like if we've made a mistake, we want to hurry up and correct it. And I've talked about this too. And sometimes it's a case of, okay, yes, there's going to be a correction, but there could be other factors coming into play. And we don't always know what those other factors are. That goes a little bit back to the Alan Watts lecture that I always talk about called "You Cannot Improve Yourself." And actually, there's a guy who I'm acquainted with him. I actually did an interview, with her, I should say, with her and with another friend, Jeffrey Jen, Alex. I had done different Alex. I had done with who had posted something to her account where she said. She said, the reason that you want to be better is the reason that you're not. And I was like, yeah, that comes from the lecture that I'm referring to, which is Alan Watts' lecture called why the urge to improve yourself, or you cannot improve yourself. And that quote comes out of the context of people saying that if you're already a being that people consider to be quote unquote imperfect, okay, and we all are, because as I say endlessly, perficere is a verb in Latin that means to be finished, and we're not finished. If we're here living our lives, we're not finished. There's different stuff that goes on. You move from, we have different challenges, and maybe we have multiple challenges going on at the same time, and they're not all necessarily going to be the same. Good morning. It's not necessarily always the same kind of a thing that we're doing with these challenges. And so we have different things going on at all time. We're never quite finished. You know what I mean? If you're finished, the only time you're finished is when you're not breathing anymore. So so there's never an urge to be perfect. But Alan Watts would talk about that. He'd say that urge to improve yourself. He says, and you're constantly like trying to watch yourself and trying to evaluate yourself and trying to criticize yourself and saying, well, I could do this differently. I could do this differently. And a lot of the work that we do, even a lot of spiritual work, we're thinking like, well, how can I do this better? And so what he had said was, he was talking about all of this conundrum that we kind of get ourselves into mentally. And also the way in which we don't necessarily, we're always trying to decide what's better from our own context. I think the phrase he had used was, let me, basically, somebody saying, let me help you out of that water, you're going to drown, says the monkey to the fish, taking him and putting him safely up a tree. We're not necessarily looking at things from the point of view, we're looking, sometimes we take a point of view of thinking, oh, I'm in this situation, that person's in that situation, that poor person in that situation, we need to help the person in that situation. And sometimes that assumes that we know what's better for that person. Okay, so sometimes that's why you just kind of have to let people do things, even if you think someone's making a mistake. There a lot of times we need to not rescue people. Sometimes to just say, okay, they need to figure it out. And part of the problem now, this kind of gets back to my family stuff, is that when you have somebody who wants to jump in and rescue all the time, then the person doesn't learn how to rescue themselves. Okay, we definitely have elements of that in my family. Especially since my brother passed away. Both of my brothers have passed away. One of them was a half-brother, but my one fully natural brother had died when he was only 22. They kept saying 23 in the obituary, but he hadn't made 23 yet. This was back in the 80s, so it was a long time ago. But he was... but ever since that time, like, my mother has this thing of, like, she has to, like, fix everything for everybody. And it's like, that's not the thing to do, because then what happens when you're not in this world anymore is that those people who have continually relied upon you don't know how to fix it themselves. They just know that, I can go to mom. All right. And And again, we all ask our parents for help once in a while. It's not a big deal. Sometimes if our parents have plenty of money, they might be like, yeah, we got you, and that can be a good thing if we kind of apply ourselves. If you have somebody who instead says like, well, I'm just not going to worry because mom's just going to finance everything, then that's a different problem. So anyway, there's a lot of family stuff that was kind of connected to this. But the whole thing about that you cannot improve yourself was funny because Alan Watts says, yes, people will say to me, I'll talk about the problem that people have of this perspective. And they'll say, well, yes, I'm aware that I do that and I would like to stop doing that. And he says, now how can I do that? And he says, and I look at them and I go, well, why do you want to know? Because the idea is just that you can't be anything other than what you are. And you kind of have to, there's a whole lot around learning to kind of trust ourselves and to trust our process. But the other piece of that, which again, I don't want to talk, when I come to these live streams, I don't want to talk about the same stuff I've talked about in other live streams, although sometimes things do kind of circle back to the same themes. The thing I want to talk about, the dream I had last night, and again, I don't necessarily need to get into all the details of the dream, but it talks about the way in which we deal with adversity, or the way in which we deal with what's in shadow. Okay, because that's something people talk about a lot. You hear a lot of lip service about shadow work. Okay, I'm doing my shadow work. Right? And doing shadow work is it can be a really, really hard thing. When it comes to the Rouhani healing, if people come into Rouhani with the idea that they are dealing with wounds or they're dealing with the shadow, understand that the energies you're dealing with that are helping you do that, they're pretty darn effective. So, you ultimately, it leads you to a place where you will be, where you can be happy, where you can be peaceful, where you can have some, got hair on my eyes, where you can have some clarity about where you're going. But oftentimes it's like anything that's blocked. Like if you have a drain that's blocked, right, there's stuff that's got to come out of it first that's not very pleasant. So for some people, then it can mean, like in my own case with Rouhani, I had like I said, when I went through the actual thing, it was like, whoa, this was really, it was incredibly intense energetically, and it really brought up this real feeling of joy and this motivation and all of this. Then I had nightmares first night, but the thing is, and sometimes people hear that and they go, oh, I don't want to deal with that. It's like, yeah, but if you really are working towards getting to a point where you're not suffering the same things, where you're not repeating the same patterns, where you have to look at that material. And that, remember, you're looking at it in a dream. It's scary, but the thing is, stop and say, is this something that I need to be scared of? And where does this adversity come from? Now, the dream I had last night was weird because it took place in Slovakia. This is why I got back to the whole thing about the Slovakian passport. And I was there. I mean, there was another guy who I'm not going to mention that person in the dream, but the other person in the dream was my former husband. And it was like we were getting on very well in this dream. And we were in Slovakia, okay, which was interesting. Now, I can't say I've never been there, okay, but just this is where the dream, in my mind, that's where I was, okay. And we had this thing where we were, I don't know, we were, I mean, like I said, we were getting along. We were, I don't know if we were on a holiday. I don't know what we were quite doing, but I remember we were getting on so well that I actually felt guilty about this other person who I actually also, was interested in, and I was like, oh, I felt like I said, I felt almost a guilt about it, but it was like, I remember we saw these like white vans, and it was like they had like biblical slogans in red painted on the side, and they were all about women and how women should submit. Okay, I think they were written in English too. I don't think they were written in Slovak, but in any case, and I remember photographing myself next to it, just basically flipping the bird. Like, yeah, okay. This submission garbage. And my husband, I think, but actually had been laughing, and he was kind of taking pictures because, of the same thing, of me doing that. And then there was something about, like, we were, like, in this warehouse. Actually, he disappeared. It was like I was there with these other men, 2 or 3 other men, where there was a group of people, both men and women, mostly old women. And it was like we were in this big like warehouse or things where a place where people bought stuff, like almost like a Costco type thing, right? And it was, I was there with a couple of these other guys, and I have no idea who they would have been. But we were talking to some of the people working, and they were complaining that now mind you, the Hungarian government, okay, that's kind of important, did not allow them to get any more than they absolutely needed, and the number that came up was 309. They needed 309 of something. And so one of the guys in the group said, well, would it be helpful if we went out and just ordered 309 of that? And, just put that in as a thing that we're requesting. And the guy kind of said, yeah, actually that would help a lot. So there was it was myself, these two guys decided they were going to go do this. And I was going to go do it with them, but I wasn't particularly vocal about it. So it was like the two of them were kind of on this, I don't know, they were going to take this scooter or whatever over. I'm like, okay, well, there's two of them. I can't go with them. But somehow I was still over in this place I don't know if it was with them, with other people, doing exactly this thing. And there was a little old woman who was very short, which fortunately does remind me of my mother, because she didn't look like my mother, but my mother is an old woman who's she's currently only about 4'9", because she's shrunk a lot. And so it's basically micromanaging the people trying to do this and telling them, no, you can't do this. And they basically just ignored her and did it anyway. And so, and then it was like I was sitting talking with a couple of other old women who were completely unconnected to this, telling me, we must have all been, on tour or doing something together, because she's like, oh, if you need to use, the restroom, use the one in this building, because it's pristine. Now, remember, sometimes that imagery will come up. I talked about the bridge dream that I'd had a little while back and how everything was filthy. This one's pristine. The one on the second floor is pristine. The one on the first floor, maybe not as much, but the one on the second floor is pristine. Okay. Weird dreams, right? All this stuff that's coming up and coming out. But the thing that I found interesting is that in order for me, to go back to the Slovakian passport, in order for me to get that, I have to go back to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, when Hungary actually did rule the village. It was actually considered part of Hungary, and at that time. But now it's part of modern Slovakia. And it was like Northern Hungary or something, because that was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That's where that comes from. And so, to me, I was like, okay, I'm looking at all of this as an ancestral dream. But the card that flew out for me this morning when I did the dream cards was a card that is called negative, okay? Which seems interesting, given the content. But there was the line in here that kind of caught my attention, and it says, I'll just read to you this whole thing, it's interesting. The negative is that which the ego abhors. To like is also to create dislike. For one who identifies with the concept of good, the opposite is identified as bad and therefore to be shunned. Whatever is real must be faced if we are to have a whole and effective life. Mind you, a whole life, not just a perfect life, a whole life. Whole means we embrace everything, no matter what it is. Identifying with one quality as a defense against the opposite will not work. What we flee from, we become. Interesting. The adversary we would avoid awaits us at the next corner. To call something good is to call something else bad. There's only reality, and that's what we deal with. Okay? So very interesting thought there. That it's not, if we think about dreams, well, again, James Hillman doesn't think about dreams as a compensation. He says, no, the dream is whole and complete and speaking a language in and of itself. It's not, oh, this thing's happening in the outer world, it's white in the outer world and it's black in my dream, right? It's not, Jung would say that that's how it goes. And maybe there are sometimes dreams of compensation. I don't think we can make blanket statements about what all dreams are. But that said, to me, yeah, the fact that it's going back to ancestry. Now I have to think in terms of that card. My ancestors fled that area. It's not really clear to me why. When I go back to the website for their village, there was definitely this idea that time there was a mass exodus. People just wanted out. So it was almost like people were running away from something. And whatever this is, I don't think it was something anybody ran away from. I think it just took a different form when it came to this country. And so, and this is something that has a lot to do with relationships and interpersonal relationships. And again, we're talking about opening the heart center and so forth, right? With Rouhani, you'd be surprised how much is stored in the heart. We always think heart energy has to just do with, oh, who I love or whatever. I mean, yeah, it's about that, but it's about more than that. It's about your ability to trust. It's about your ability to forgive. It's about your ability to, and forgiveness, by the way, not just of other people, but yourself. It's about your ability to love yourself and to trust that you know what is right for you. And I feel like that's really kind of what the tone was of this dream. First of all, I felt like it was almost like showing my marriage in a better light, even though the reality of it was not. I mean, there were moments that were okay, but it was just not to represent my marriage as like this great thing. I don't know. When I was dating, we were happy. When I was married, not really. So I feel like there was this. It's like almost. It's almost kind of getting back to the origin, not only of relationship issues, but also how they might be tied into ancestral issues. And 309 is an interesting number. There's a lot of possibilities. You can read about angel numbers and things like that. And the thing is, you get a lot of different stuff. And I don't always know that the interpretations that people put on it are correct. If I think about 3 and I think about 9, in terms of tarot, we're talking about the Empress and we're talking about the Hermit, right? We're talking about Taurus, Virgo. That does directly connect into my family. Not only my Taurus, but my mother's a Taurus, and 3 is the Empress, right? That's the mother energy. And Virgo is my sister. And my sister is the one who is probably, I'm sorry to tell her, she's probably the one who's been the most like my mother, but she's also right now kind of in rebellion in that aspect, being like, oh my God, I don't want to turn into that. Or at least the aspects of it of her that are problematic or challenging. She's like, no, I don't want to be that. But I feel like this gets back to that energy of challenging, like because when we talk about shadow work, what people will always tell you is that the thing that's in shadow, that thing you abhor, is something that you already are, and we can be very offended by that, or that sounds like a form of shaming, but it's not. It's the idea that the outer world, inner and outer world, are not really separate, and when you encounter certain people and situations, it's reflecting something back. It's pointing something out. It doesn't mean that you're that kind of a person. If somebody's murdered by somebody, it doesn't mean they were a murderer, right? I mean, it doesn't. That's not quite. It's not quite that literal. It's more like there's something about it. Whether that person, it could be that person's fear, it could be that person's wounding, it could be that person's rage, it could be a lot of things. And a lot of times, the experiences we attract are meant to allow us to sort of confront that, to say, okay, how are we going to integrate this? How are we going to deal with it? How are we going to transform it into something that is part of what works for us? How do we recycle it, so to speak? And because the shadow elements of you are not something that are going to go away. That's who we are. We are. That's why a lot of times I talk about myself being a dark worker rather than a light worker. Not because because again, people only associate dark with something evil, and it's like, no, dark is just what a lot of times we just don't want to deal with for a variety of reasons. It's just the stuff that if we did deal with it, or if we did see where it fits in, then we'd actually be a lot happier. It wouldn't be an issue for us. It would be there, but it wouldn't be that inner critic that beats us up all the time. Your inner critic is still going to talk, but you're just kind of like, all right. It's just they're just another voice. They're not a voice necessarily that, if you feel confident, trusting, and committing in yourself and your own process. And I don't mean being in a stubborn way, like where I'm just going to stubbornly cling to my point of view, even if everything around me tells me it's not right. I don't mean that. I mean it's more that when you feel authentically that you are doing the right thing, you can get the criticism around you that may be a reflection of the criticism that's within you. And sometimes, like I said, we follow scripts that are really, really old. And I think this is what a lot of this, it goes back to the Rouhani, how it's digging up. It's like, okay, look, here's the thing here, and here's where it comes from. So for me, there's something ancestral about it. Ancestrally, there was a running away from something. And it's something that is still playing out, even though it has nothing to do with my life. There's something that's still playing out there. And somehow the fact that the relationship thing came into it, it may be affecting my relationships, may even be affecting that idea of prosperity. Because the idea is, we're trying to order things, but we're not going to be allowed to have any more than exactly what we need. And somebody else is saying, well, I'll just come in and ask for that so that you can get the abundance that you need. You know what I mean? It's like, it's interesting. And it also kind of falls into this way of trying to think about things differently, you know? Dream symbolism can aid us in that. I mean, it doesn't necessarily give us a direct answer, but it may show us that there's other ways around what appears to be a foregone conclusion, something that's fated, or something that's, you know, we think about the curse of the family line, right? But it doesn't have to be that. There are other ways around it, even if there are certain elements. And weirdly, in my family, that element only shows up as kind of a cranky old woman. It's really weird. You know, in dream imagery and things like that, who's just saying, no, things can't be this way. And I don't know. I mean, whether that's literally somebody from the past whose kind of energy is still lingering, or whether that is just a archetypal representation of something that is, you know, kind of, we almost think of like the night hag that causes paralysis, you know, like that kind of element that needs to be shaken off and that needs to be let go of. So interesting stuff. Let's do our readings for today and see what we've got. So let's see. So what does everybody watching and everybody who will be watching need to know for this morning? I am, by the way, working on the Libra through Pisces readings. Those are going to be up. They should be up tomorrow because I'm so far I'm on schedule. I do have a client coming over today, but hopefully. But yeah, I think I've got most of that under control. Okay. All right. So here's our cards for today. Our first card is participation. Okay, this is the Four of Wands. So yeah, participation. How do we participate and work with others? How do we participate in the world? Whether we're participating in a way that we perceive as positive or negative, whether all our encounters are always friendly and people bringing us opportunity and support, or whether people are not. How do we participate? Because the opposite of participating is withdrawing and not participating. Okay, which is also a choice that we can make. But this is really about a time in which we need to kind of be in the world and participating in our own process, particularly like what is it, you know, what are we doing here? And the inner feeling of which we are unaware, well, maybe we are aware. Sometimes that comes up and I'm like, yeah, I think there's a slight awareness of this. Here's the Tower card again, right? The Thunderbolt. This is the person who is, and again, this is a burning down, but it's also an awakening. It's a matter of all of those places where, you know, where the scar tissue is healed over something. It's like, now we're breaking it open. Okay, now we're going to break it open and we're going to re-heal this the right way. We're not going to do it the way, we're not just going to learn to lick our wounds and kind of limp along with them. We're going to figure out how are we going to do that. And so this requires our participation. All right. The external feeling of which we are aware, we have the Mind card. This is really the Knight of, the Knight, I was going to say, because I think, I always want to say that the Knight of Clouds is actually the fighting card. So this might actually be the Page of Clouds. Yeah, they have the little diamonds on here, and I'm always kind of like, do I have the correct suit for that? But in any case, very clear what the Mind card means. The way in which we get ourselves, the way in which we try to overthink things. And we let our mind get involved, and we decide that when we start using our imagination or paying attention to our dreams imagery or paying attention to what our intuition's telling us, the mind wants to get in and dissect, you know, the viability of that. It wants to go in and do the SWOT assessment, you know, like if you ever did do that for a corporation where, you know, you have your SWOT analysis. Well, let's try to figure out, you know, the risks and the weaknesses and the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I think that's what SWOT stands for. So we always want to come in and kind of and again, sometimes if we are really confused, we should ground ourselves and just say, okay, let's take a deep breath and look at the facts. That's not a bad thing to do. But sometimes just examining the facts doesn't take into account what other possibilities might be. The facts might just be based on, well, typically when we do A, B happens. So therefore, we're not going to do A because we don't want the result of B. But the question may be, well, okay, are A and B your only options? Are A, B, and C? Yeah, thank you. A and B your only options? Are there other options? Are there other ways to do this? like in the dream I just told you about, it's just kind of like, okay, well, we have, and when we say that the government tells us, that's the authority, right? That's the authority telling us, and mind you, it's an old authority, saying, no, this is the way it has to be. The old woman who would come up and was trying to stop the, no, you can't do it that way. You can't do it that way. And it's like, yeah, I can. Look, I just did it. You know, there can be a different way of doing things. And, but when we get the mind involved, we say, oh, well, I do the right thing. Should I have done this? Oh my God, you know, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? The mind gets itself wrapped up. And we know this. This is what we're aware of. But the mind is freaking out because something is breaking down. And there's no need to be scared of the breakdown, because this is a process that we want to meet halfway. Something's breaking down so that something new can break through, right? And yeah, and we don't have to plan too much. It's interesting, we have the traveling card, right? And we were just talking about that. This is interesting because it's almost like somebody is traveling up a mountain path, but it looks like I think I've mentioned this on this card before. It's almost like there's like a shortcut through the mountain. Okay, so this indicates things happening fast and not having to make a whole lot of effort. Things just kind of going the way they need to. So this seems to indicate Eight of Wands energy it's fire energy. This is about things moving along very, very quickly, messages coming in, things happening. And this is about traveling. And sometimes this card is literally about traveling for some people. Okay, but it's this 8 energy. It's this idea that you don't have to. The mind is telling you that you have to respond in some kind of an extraordinary way, but the outcome is the ordinariness card, 8 of Pentacles. Okay, we just need to keep doing our work. We just need to keep doing our thing. Oftentimes, if we go back to the whole concept of you cannot improve yourself, it's the idea that you just need to. Yeah, you just need to keep doing your thing. Keep doing your thing and believe in the thing that you're doing. Sometimes this is hard to deal with, but if we practice grounding, if we practice meditation, if we practice kind of staying in that center, this is still going to go on, but it becomes less and less of a thing. And if we meet this process, if we participate in it, right, then things will go along much more easily. I keep thinking of Be Water with Alan Watts. Yeah, and he also, the Be Water, and also I think he had talks about whether or not we're waves or particles. Like there's that whole wave-particle discussion. I remember he did a whole thing on that too. And because the idea that we flow with something, you know, it's very, very Taoist actually, or even very Zen Buddhist in the way you think about it. You're kind of flowing with the situation. You're not just, and you're just doing your thing. Whatever comes out at you, whatever adversity you face, it's just part of the bigger picture. It's not that, it's not a bad thing. Oh, I'm cursed. Oh, this is happening. That's happening. I've got to. A lot of times people will do that. If it's a bad thing that's happening to me, I must be cursed in some way, or I must be under psychic attack, or I must be this or that. And you know, I mean, again, I'm not suggesting that those kind of things might not happen to people at times, but you know, if you basically, you know, protect yourself every day, protect your energy, ground yourself every day. And, you know, like I said, I always recommend meditation to people. But again, even somebody who's like going through the Rahani process right now, or going through the healings, because I do have, you know, some clients in this who are going through this. It's just, you know, allow the information to come. A lot of times we want to fight with it and say, oh, no, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to do that. And it's like, well, yes, but it's showing you the path to you finally, you know, this not being an issue for you, you know, from you being able to move ahead with something. You've got 8 energy here too, which is interesting, because the 8s in tarot you have an 8 of Wands and you have an 8 of Pentacles. So 8s really indicate that we're coming towards the end of something. When you get to 8, 9, and 10 in the cards, you're moving towards the end of something. You're moving towards completion. And you're either going to be dealing with it. So then there's a matter of what we end up doing individually with the 9s, and then what we do collectively with the 10s, and then sort of like we're finished with whatever that thing is, and then we move on to the next thing. Or we may be, again, there may be multiple things going on at the same time. A lot of times we talk about life as though we're being handed one challenge at a time, and we all know that's rarely the way it is. Generally, we're juggling a lot of different things at the same time. And, you know, and it's kind of like balancing this idea that we have of the past, and even the past that we're not necessarily that aware of, you know. Let's see, I'm going to do a Moonology poll. Let's just see what we get here. Here we go. It's funny. Full moon in Pisces. Balance spirituality and practicality. Literally pretty much what I just said. Let's just see what the book says on that one. Have you been so head in the clouds that you've lost touch with reality? If so, take it as a sign that you need to pay attention and make a concerted effort to move towards your goals. The more practical steps you can take, the better. It's time to find an inner balance between your responsibilities and your dreams. Meditate on your question, and the solutions to your issue may now come through very clearly. If you're in a tricky situation because you have been acting the martyr, the card will be a message from the cosmos to drop the act for everyone's sake. Okay, I don't think anybody here is martyring themselves. I do know people who do martyr themselves, but that does go back to what I'm saying about a lot of times when we see ourselves as the victim of a universe that hates us. And that may be more what it's talking about here. Yeah, it's not the universe that hates you. It may just be a sign that you may need to change course. Maybe you got a lot of ideas, but you haven't grounded them in reality yet. So it's like, okay, well now think about how you're going to do that. If you have been too stuck in the no, it can only be this way and this way, well, maybe now you need to move more into your imagination. Okay, it's that kind of a thing. The other additional meanings. Meditate every day and see what comes to you. Answers will come. Follow your intuition. It won't let you down. And avoid substance abuse. Yeah. I mean, it's basically saying, you want to use Piscean energy in a way that you're not trying to escape from things, but rather that you are, you can balance what comes through imagination with what you do practically to make things happen. And a lot of times it's a matter of going with the flow. It's not, a lot of times people will think a balancing act means like, oh, well, I did, 30% of A over here, so I've got to do 30% of B over here, and that's not how it works. I mean, to be in balance is to be, basically, as I've said, it's not like this. It's not really scales. It's more like the Leminskit. It's the figure eight, right? It's that infinity sign. We kind of flow from one side to the other. You were talking about be water. Yeah, you're kind of flowing from one side to the other, and you just let that happen. Alan Watts also talks about how you can, like, and I said this the other day. You can take the oar and you can try to push yourself along to rowing your boat, or you can aim your sails the right way and go with the wind and not have to do any work. So there's the idea of doing things in a way that is the most pleasurable, but at the same time recognizing that as these things come up, it is better to deal with them, because once you've kind of confronted what that is and allowed yourself to integrate and to transmute that, then there's no guarantee it won't come up again, but it usually doesn't have the sting that it had before when it comes up again. Or you finally, you have a clarity about, okay, this is the thing. It's not, there was only, maybe this is coming out of tradition. Maybe this is coming out of ancestry. Maybe I don't necessarily need to be doing this anymore. Maybe I need to, whatever way I can trust is coming from myself. Again, the more you have that heart opening, the more you're able to love and trust yourself and realize that you do have the answers. You do know what to do. As a spiritual coach, my job isn't to tell you how to live your life. My job is to help you open up and find your own answers. So I don't say to people like, oh, I have these 5 steps and your life's going to be perfect now. It's like, no, you're opening up to your own truth, whatever that turns out to be for you. And it's not for me or anybody else to say what that truth is supposed to be or how you're supposed to do it. But everybody, it begins with that opening. So anyway, interesting stuff today. It was a little bit all over, but again, it is a live stream, so I'm kind of, I usually have kind of a general theme, and then I just see where it goes as I start talking. So I hope all of you have a wonderful Sunday. And of course I'll be back tomorrow morning, like I said, barring power outages or anything, but I don't think we're expecting anything like that. Who knows? But that would be, usually that's the only reason, or if I tell people I've got something going on at that hour of the morning and I'm not gonna be able to. Thank you. Resonated as always. Have a great day. Oh, you're welcome. And I hope it resonated for you guys. And we will see you tomorrow morning. Take care. Have a great day.